This is what we call Register Rock, because this is where the immigrants coming through, they saw the water and the green grass and come over here for water. But it was the immigrants on the Overland Trail, which would have been from 1862 to 68 before the railroad, and that's what most of these dates are. There's a few before that which were soldiers in the cavalry, and a lot of those have their name and rank or whatever on it. And but most of these names were from the 62s to 68. The water brought everything here, including the immigrants, but it originally brought the buffalo. The buffalo came along Bitter Creek, which is just down there half a mile. This spring runs into it, and this was spring water. It is sulphur, as you can see by the white, where it comes out of the hill behind me. It's sulphur on the rock. The one thing they didn't know about this water, the water would have been good if they'd have put it in a bucket and left it overnight. All the sulfur gases would go off and it would have been good drinking water. But the buffalo came through here, and of course then the Indians followed the buffalo, and there's proof of that because there's arrowheads and petroglyphs that the Indians did in this area. And then the trappers and frontiersmen followed this trail because there was water in the Bitter Creek. It wasn't good water to drink in Bitter Creek, but this made it one of the stops. Then the Cherokee Indians came through here. They came all the way from Oklahoma to this area. There was 3 variants of the Cherokee Trail through this part of Wyoming. This is the northernmost, and it was the beginning of the Overland Trail. The Cherokee Trail was probably in 1849. That's when the 49ers were doing the gold rush in California. And by 59, the cavalry was improving this road for what they thought was going to be the Mormon War with the Mormons in Salt Lake, but it never did materialize. But anyway, they improved this to haul their ammunition and whatever. Overland Trail come through here. It only lasted for 6 years, from 1862 to 1868 when the railroad came through. This area was definitely a travel corridor. It had, after all the things I mentioned, there was also the telegraph came through the same time they put the overland stage through in 1862. In 1913, then the Lincoln Highway was started. It didn't get much building out here because there was not enough money and enough people to support it. It wasn't government supported when they built the Lincoln Highway. So the Lincoln Highway was taken over by the US 30. They built it right on top of the Lincoln in places, but other places you can still find the Lincoln Highway and some of the old Lincoln bridges. They also had the airmail. It was decided that the mail was so slow from New York and Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, it took 7 to 8 days on the railroad to get there, and so the government decided it was too slow, and so they started the airmail. Airmail started in 1923. They started out, they could fly from San Francisco to Cheyenne, and from New York or Washington, D.C. to Chicago in one day, and then at night they were putting the mail on the train, and then in the morning they'd put it back in the air, trying to get it from Chicago to Cheyenne. But that's where the airmail came in, and the airport at Bitter Creek was one of the first put in for that. Later years there was arrows up and down the line about every 10, 15 miles, where there was a light beacon which guided the airplanes with a 1,000,000 candle power white light, and on the back side of that light was a red or green. Green if it had an airport, red if it didn't. It had a 250,000 candle power light, and those rotated so that they were flashing in the air. There's an airplane arrow right above Point of Rocks here that's got a little direction change. In other words, the base of the arrow went to the tower for the beacon, and then it had a little bend in it to the right. Those beacons all had generators on them to generate the power for the electricity. And on the roof of those buildings that those were in had 2 numbers on it. Those numbers were the closest thing from Salt Lake was, this one in this area would be about 180, so it would be 18 on the roof. The 0 was just forgotten. And the one at Bitter Creek was 190, and so it had 19 on the roof. I told them it's 190 miles from Salt Lake, and that's how they judged where they were.